Hello, all. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon. So, thank you for all the questions, all the comments on the previous or the part one of this video about the custom AL events. In the part two, we'll talk about two things which we haven't talked in the previous one. One is isolated events, and another is an internal event. So in the previous video, if you haven't seen that, go back and you'll find the link somewhere here. Watch the previous video first and then continue this because there is a relation between both these videos. Now in today's video, we will move ahead from what we did in the previous video, which is the business event and the integration event, and we'll understand what is the isolated event, where we'll spend majority of time, and then at the end, in brief, we'll talk about, and I'll also show you demos around it, what is an internal event. Now before we move further, let's quickly understand what we saw in the last one. Okay, so in the last one, we understood how the event subscription process works. The event gets triggered when the code execution reaches to the event. Then it looks for the subscriber. If it finds the subscriber, it invokes the event subscriber. If there is no error, it looks for the another subscriber. And if there is an error, then it roll back the transaction and terminate the operation, which is we all know about. Either it's a business event or an integration event. Now, what changes when we coin the word isolated event? Now, before we get into it, let's quickly see how you kind of define an isolated event, which is more or less same, but I've created a sample code unit for you. So here is a code unit and we'll see executing it. In this, there is this normal event. It can be an integration event or a business event. As we understood in the last video, the only difference between both of them is the contract that comes with the business event. Now in the normal event, which in this case is an integration event, you will there is some code before this, then the integration event gets called, which then calls this and looks for all the subscriber and executes normally, and this is what's happening there. In the same way, let's look at the other one, the test isolated event. In this, the code remains same. The code is exactly same, and the definition of this event adds one more parameter, which is an optional parameter called isolated. By default, the value of isolated, which is an optional parameter, is false. So if you don't define it, like we haven't defined it here, it is considered as false. And in this case, we have set it to true. The code, the event signature, everything remains same, other than we have added one additional parameter, which is isolated. So this is sample isolated event, and then the same counter and same thing is happening there. Now there is a huge difference by just adding this new parameter, which is the isolated. If you don't know about the include center and global var access, I'll highly recommend, even if you are here, to go back and watch the previous video on the series, the part one of this. Okay. So this is what was happening till now. But what happens as soon as you introduce an isolated event? Now, as soon as you introduce that new parameter, which is the isolated event parameter, in your definition of your event, the change happens at this point. The system, as it finds all the subscriber that is subscribing to this event, checks is the event is this particular event, is it isolated or not. If it is not isolated, which means it's a simple integration or a business event, then the process flows as it is. But if it's an isolated event, it kind of begins the transaction. So at this point, the transaction for that particular subscriber is being begun, and the subscription has been invoked as usual. What else changes? As soon as that happens, now the error handling, if it is there are no errors, it doesn't directly go into the next subscriber. It actually again checks that is the event is isolated or not. If event is not isolated, the process remains same. But if the event is isolated, there is a commit that happens for that subscriber that being called internal commit. You don't have to write it. And then after the commit, it fetches and finds the new subscriber. But the interesting part is now, what happens if there is an error with an isolated event? In a normal event, it'll just roll back the transaction and terminate the operation. But in case of isolated event, it actually only rolls back if it is a normal event, not isolated. But if it's an isolated event, it rolls back the transaction and then does not terminate the operation. It actually goes back and finds the net subscriber. Now it sounds a little bit confusing, but in summary, if there are let's say 5 subscribers to an event, out of them 4 are erroring out, or let's say the 4th one is erroring out. In a normal event or a normal business event or an integration event, because there is one subscriber which is causing an error message, the whole operation will end and you will get an error message. In case of an isolated event, other than the erroring subscriber, all other event subscriber will be executed, irrespective of even that subscriber is calling a a error. That sounds so good. We should be doing that, right? Because then all my events, if you think from a very easy perspective, all the events that I'm defining in my app should be isolated. Because if it is isolated, then I don't need to worry about if somebody wrote a wrong subscriber. But not just that, there are some catches around it. The first one, start with this commit. So every time you're processing a transaction, you typically don't do a commit until the whole transaction is over. Otherwise, you lose the capability of rolling it back. So let's say the subscriber is executed, commit happened, and after that, in the standard code that you have in your app, there's an error message. But because it was an isolated event, it already did a commit. So that kind of gets a little bit nasty there. So what you need to remember while dealing with isolated event, and we'll see it in action. While dealing with isolated event, read-only transactions are allowed to call isolated event directly. When you're reading the data, you are allowed to call isolated event directly. If you're writing something, then before calling or invoking the isolated event, you have to explicitly commit before you do that. So there should be a pre-commit at this point before I invoke my isolated event. Only changes done via modify, delete and insert on normal table will be rolled back. So if there are changes associated with table, modify, delete and insert and the table type is normal, those will be rolled back. But HTTP calls, variable value change or changes to single instance code unit member won't be rolled back. So if you have local variables which are being passed with the event and you are incrementing the value, those values will not be rolled back. Same for the HTTP calls and same for the single instance code units. During the installation, upgrading or uninstalling the extension, isolated events are kind of considered as, they are normal. They are not isolated at that moment. And when you read Microsoft article about it, it very clearly says why that happens. Because the reason for this behavior is that these operations of installing, uninstalling and upgrading an extension requires that all operation within them are done in one transaction. So explicit commit calls can't be made during these operations. So when you are installing an app, uninstalling an app, or upgrading an app, even if you have isolated event, they will be treated as normal business or integration event. They will not be treated as isolated event. Now that raises a question, why isolated event? So there are scenarios where isolated event makes sense. Now think of a scenario where you are subscribing to an event which is on company open. Now on company open will get triggered whenever a company gets open, and by mistake you have put an error message there. Now till the point it's an integration event or a business event, the error, as soon as your app gets published, no one will be able to log into the system because you have an error message in your subscriber. And there are other scenarios like this. So if you notice, even the on company open have been changed from a normal event to an isolated event, so that even if your subscriber is causing an error, it doesn't stop the normal operation of the system, and you can still using it. Now I think there is a use case for it where you can actually use it, but use it wisely, as I'm saying it, because you need to remember that there is a explicit commit that you'll have to write before you do any write operations, and then there is a commit that's happening whenever the subscriber is being completed. So in a transaction where things can go south after your event has been subscribed and later on, you need to be very clear that when and how you are writing an isolated event. But okay, we'll go through this again so that we kind of understand it from that perspective. Let's first see a quick demo of how it kind of works. Okay, so let me see. I have my business central open and I have my core app installed, or the demo app. In the demo app, as you saw, that there is a normal event where I'm seeing how many subscribers are kind of utilizing this particular event after this has been completed, and same for the isolated event. Now what we'll do in the subscribing app is we have a code unit. Let's figure out a new code unit, and let me see where that is. Okay, I might have a reference here. Okay, so let's try to subscribe both the events. The event sub code unit, we're trying to subscribe to an event which is in my demo app, and false and false. Now there is no element name, and then surely there is an event. Okay, so I'll just copy paste this so that it becomes easier for me going forward. I don't have to kind of do this every time, and I can just copy paste this. Okay, so on the sum event, what is the sum event? The first event that I would like to do is integration event, which is the event where I have the counter, which is this one, and this is my normal event, which kind of subscribing to this particular or invoking this particular event. In this, I would like to say test one normal, and then it is giving me a counter which I can set. So I can say, okay, counter +1, that's my first subscriber, +1, and the same one I'll just copy paste this and say test 2 normal, and in this one I'll say error subscriber failed. Okay, so typically, because it's a normal event or an integration or a business event without isolated, what will happen when I end up running this is I'll get a subscriber failed message. Let's try the other one now. Okay, so I'm subscribing to the second event, and that event is isolated event. Okay, test one isolated. In this, I'm again getting the counter. Now let's set the counter. Okay, also let's set the counter on the second one as we did earlier, and say error, subscriber failed. Now let's think about some other scenario. We read on this that the modify, delete or insert call will be automatically rolled back. So what I can do is, let's keep it as it is, and let's define one more. Okay, this is test 3. Okay, and here let's say EDC sample of record EDC sales and purchase header. Okay, so I said counter +1, simple, and then I said EDC sample dot delete all. Okay, and then I said error, subscriber failed, and then also I said counter as +1. Now remember, this one is for the normal event or the integration event that we have without isolation. So typically I should get a subscriber failed without the message that I've set here, which is subscriber counter. In this case, the counter is being incremented by 1. Okay. Okay, isolated event. In the second one, I'm also incrementing the counter, so the counter should be 2. And then in the third one, I'm setting up increasing the counter by 1, deleting everything from the table that I have, which is sales purchase header, and then generating an error message. So let's see what happens when I try to kind of execute this. Okay, so let me publish this. This should get into my sandbox, and it says, oh, sorry. Okay, I'm confusing the system because I have multiple projects open. Okay, I should have this, and this is one. Okay, let's go ahead. Let's publish this. Okay, why it's getting confused? Okay, I don't know. Is my workspace open? Yes, my workspace is open. Let me just increment this for the time being, generate the app manually, and reveal this in my file explorer and get into my environment. Let's get into extension management. I'm pretty sure my core or the demo extension is still there and has no problems. Let's go ahead and upload this particular extension. Okay, maybe I'll fail because I forgot to set permissions into it. So let me just quickly go ahead and build a new AL object for permission, and this is EDC sub permissions. Okay, so this is done. Okay, let's do an upload extension, and I'll go and pick the file 1.01. Okay, and let's deploy this. Now this app of subscriber is dependent on the demo app, which is already available in the environment, and I can actually check that what happens with the subscriber app. So it's being published, going to be published right now. While this is publishing, I have a question for you. While this is happening, go to your comment section and tell me what will happen. Will my isolated counter will say 1, 2, 3 or 4? I'm pretty sure everybody's saying 3, as in 1 is for sure, 2 is for sure. Sorry, this is isolated event. So 1, 2, 3 and 4. So the options are either 2, 3 or 4. Head to the comment box and let me know what you think. Pause this video and let me know what do you think what would happen to the counter. Will it be 4? Will it be 3 or will it be 2? While this is publishing, I'm giving you some time to go ahead and do that. And as it gets published, we'll see that. So to test this, what I have already done is on the page extension, I have added 2 actions. One invokes the function where the normal event is, and one invokes the function where the isolated event is. So they just call it, and as they call it, which raises the event, and then whatever is going to happen, we'll see that in a while. So I'm hoping you have already written your answers, either 2, 3 or 4, and we are good here at this moment. Okay, so now we have both the apps, subscriber app and the demo app. Now I can go and do a action call from here. As you can see, the associated table that we are using in this particular example in the code have 2 records right now. EDC sales purchase header have 2 records, and why I'm emphasizing on this is because on the isolated event I have written to delete everything from it. Okay, so call integration event. We all know what's gonna happen. My license does not grant me permission to execute this because okay, I just need to change this. Why it doesn't give me permission? That's okay. I might need to go and, but I'm super, so I should have permission to execute everything. Okay, let me just quickly go and check. Okay, I'm super, but let me see if I have to kind of add new. I'll just add the EDC ones which I have added. Subscriber permissions. Okay, hopefully that does the magic. Let's see. If it doesn't, I'll have to test this out. Okay, recall integration event. Okay, I don't have permission to do this, which is a little bit off because 60,001. Okay, I should have. That's not a problem. I'll just change the numbers. So just I'll pause the video for this minute. I'll just change the number to 50,000 range and I'll come back. Okay, so I published the version 2 where I've just renumbered them to a different ID. I don't understand the error message. I'll have to check that. Let's go with that. Okay, so let's go back into our page and let's try calling integration event. I'm pretty sure everybody have written answers in the comment till now. If you haven't, still you got the time. So pause the video and add the comment. Okay, so as expected, when we call the integration event, it just errors out saying subscriber failed. The reason is very simple, that one of the subscriber that we have here says subscriber failed. So even if this is successfully executed, the second one just fails and you end up with an error message for a normal event. Now let's think about the isolated event. Let's test out the isolated event. So when I call isolated event, where I've already written a subscriber which is increasing the counter by 1, the other subscriber which is also incrementing the counter by 1, the third subscriber which is increasing the counter by 1, deleting the record from this particular table, have an error message, and then again increasing the counter by 1. So when we do that, it says subscriber counter is 3. So anybody who have commented 3 on the comments, thank you, you're great. Let's understand what happened. And as I click OK, the data still persists. So what happened here, first this subscriber was called, or whatever subscriber was called, any of these three, right? It increases the counter by 1. Let's assume this and then this and then this. Okay, so let me place them in the sequence that I'm trying to explain this. Okay, here. Okay, so in the first one, the counter got incremented by 1, so the value was 1. In the second one, the counter was incremented by 1, so the value was 2. There's a delete all, so everything got deleted. But then there was an error. Now, as soon as error happens, if you remember what you saw on the previous slide, is as soon as there is a error on a insert, modify or delete transaction, they get rolled back. So this got rolled back because there was an error and the counter values are still 2, and because there is an error, this is unreachable. This line is unreachable. It headed up to the third subscriber and said counter plus 1, so it made the counter to 3, and nothing was deleted because only changes done via modified, delete or insert will be rolled back. But remember, the variable alterations will not be rolled back. So even if there was an error message, the rollback did not happen to the counter, but it did happen to the record which I was trying to delete on a normal table. So remember these with respect to isolated event, and if there is a business case, let me know into the comments. If you think that there is a business case for this, you can surely use the isolated event. Okay, but before we move further into it, let's talk about the another thing that we have planned for this video, which is internal event. Now that's name itself kind of talks a lot about it, but let's quickly see about it. See what it is. Okay, so there's a test internal event where there is some random code that you have here, and then you have you're invoking a sample internal event. The internal event comes like this, and you can find that in the event internal. This is internal. Now internal event is how you add this, right? And you also have an isolated option here. Okay. With the internal event, I also have a subscriber for it here, so that whenever my internal event is triggered, I can subscribe it from the same app, which is I can do it for any event. But when I copy this code and move this to my subscriber code unit here and say, okay, let me try to subscribe to an internal event from my parent app, it gives me an error message that you cannot access this particular event due to its protection level. So as the name suggests, internal event are meant to be consumed or subscribed within the app where they are defined. You cannot subscribe internal event from an app which is taking dependency on the app where it is defined. There are use cases for it where Microsoft is trying to kind of detangle all the code and trying to make it more eventful. And then there are situations where Microsoft would like to control that they only subscribe to their event. So if you see an internal event which you cannot subscribe to, or sorry, a event which you cannot subscribe to, then be sure that you are seeing it as internal event. Like here, the only error that I see is that it is inaccessible due to production level, but it'll be nice. I don't hope Microsoft is watching this, but it'll be nice if we have some kind of identifier here that out of these three events, what are these? Like I can see here that it's an integration event, which is great because it's an integration event. But then I don't see that it's an internal event, and I'll have to end up with an analysis. So a small notification of saying, oh, it's an internal event will be great. And same for the isolated event. Yes, it's an integration event, But in the bracket, if Microsoft somehow can say it's an isolated event, then all the developers who are working on these, subscribing to these Microsoft event or any apps that they are taking dependency on, will make their life easier to see, oh, is this event an isolated or not? Because it's very hard right now. I actually have to go here, and based on code definition I can only see that, oh, this is a isolated event, and then based on that I need to rethink about the subscriber which I'm using, where I'm trying to use this. I've used the word subscriber a lot, and that's how YouTube kind of recommend this to other people. So if you kind of don't mind, subscribe to this channel, that'll be great. Okay, so going forward, make sure that whenever you are trying to subscribe to an event, take one extra step to make sure that is it an isolated event or not. Because if it's an isolated event, you need to make sure that you remember all these things. Right transaction need to be explicitly commit before invoking an isolated event, which is on the party who is defining the event. So that's not a problem. The only changes that will be rolled back if in your subscriber you are writing something modify, delete or insert on a normal table. But if you have a variable, if you have a single instance code unit, or if you have HTTP calls, they will not be rolled back. So it's very important that you check that the event that you're subscribing is isolated or not. And based on that, you need to kind of rethink about the code that you're writing so that it doesn't cause problem for your customer when they start using that in their system. Hopefully with this I have covered majorly everything around the custom events. Like we have talked about the business event, let's quickly brief about it. Business event, integration event, internal event, and then I forgot one thing, that you can make isolated event of any of these three categories. You can have a business event of type isolated, you can have a integration event of type isolated, you can also have an internal event of type isolated. So make sure to check whenever you are subscribing to an event, is it isolated or not, and based on that finding you need to rethink about the code that you're going to write. I'm looking for a lot of 2, 3, 4s into the comments. But other than that, if you have any queries or suggestions, let me know into the comment box. I religiously read all your comments. At this point, you know what's the drill. If you like the content, hit the like button. If you think this is something which will help your fellow developers or other people in general in the community, then share this on your social media. Let's the message pass on to everyone who's working in Business Central. And as I said, it's all about subscriber. Whenever there is an event, there's our subscriber. So if you haven't, then subscribe to this channel. And I'm pretty sure everybody knows till now that I have started a new consulting firm in India for Business Central and Power Platforms called Aditya Consulting. If you have any business query, we can help you with your needs. We work with customers and partners across the globe. Reach out to us at info@adityaconsulting.com or connect me on any of the social media and we'll be happy to help you. So I'll see you sooner than later with another interesting video. Till then, keep learning and keep sharing whatever you're learning so that we all write great codes and make great apps. Thank you and have a nice day.